very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
Now we need a sense of global responsibility. Think 6 billion humanity equal.
Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great.
Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping.
It is time that we all perceive gender on a spectrum instead of two sets of opposing ideals.
We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.
Within the sound of silence.
But in order to talk freely of those things, you have to release yourself of those pains.
You see, love liberates. It doesn't bind. Love says, I love you. I love you if you're in China. I love you if you're across town. I love you if you're in Harlem. I love you.
If you hit a talib with your shoe, then there would be no difference between you and that talib. You must not treat others that much with cruelty and that much harshly. You must fight others, but through peace and through dialogue and through education. Then I said, I'll tell him how important education is and that I even want education for your children as well. And I'll tell him, that's what I want to tell you. Now do what you want.
And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more.
You can be that great a generation.
I said that why shall I wait for someone else? Why shall I be looking to the government, to the army, that they would help us? Why don't I raise my voice? Why don't we speak up for our rights?
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. Confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
You know what's right. Just do right. You don't really have to ask anybody. The truth is, right may not be expedient, it may not be profitable, but it will satisfy your soul.
Of course, the task will not be easy, but not to do this would be a crime against humanity.
All that is needed for the forces of evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing.
Think about my granddad's laugh. Think often about that night. About how some people are waiting for people like us to slide our hands against their walls and say, close your eyes. I'm going to turn on a light.
Welcome to the Forum on CHRW. My name is David Seston. In ancient Rome, the Forum stood as a place where all were able to come out and discuss matters of public interest and concern, and they were able to do so in a free and open environment. Recently, at Western University and other universities around the world, students do not feel that they are able to speak their minds or ask the questions about subjects that concern them. They feel they will be judged by their friends, their peers, and their seniors because they question what's being told to them and whether what they're being told is right or wrong. We cannot have a free and just society where people are afraid to ask the questions and are afraid to speak up. This forum is a project aiming to open dialogue on these subjects that concern students. It is a place where students can talk to other students while trying to get an idea on the concepts that are floating around them without knowing why it's there. There won't be any professors or academics lecturing. This forum will be the student's voice. Because if you hear us talk about it, then maybe it's okay for you to talk about it with your friends and your classmates. The forum will focus on the what, the why, and the how. What the issue is, why it has become an issue, and how it affects Western students specifically and university students in general. What we're talking about today is mental health, how it can be affected by culture, and how you can help yourself and the people around you. Why it's important is because it's incredibly relevant to today's youth. The Canadian Mental Health Association estimates that 10 to 20% of Canadian youth will be affected by a mental health issue. With so many international students and students from an amazing array of cultures and backgrounds, this conversation needs to be had. How it affects Western students should be pretty obvious this year. We've lost friends to mental health disorders this year, and it has brought the conversation to a forefront. At the low end, 10% of Western students would be 3,000 undergrads and almost 600 grad students. That means that somebody in your class is suffering from something. quite possibly it's you who's suffering, usually in silence. Today we're going to talk about it, hopefully shed a little bit of light on it, and open the conversation up. Maybe by the end of the show, you'll notice that the shiny happy guy sitting next to you in that lecture might actually be hiding something. Maybe you'll understand that you don't have to be shiny and happy all the time, and it's okay to ask for help. All right, and welcome to the forum again. Today we're going to be talking about something that's near and dear to a lot of us. A lot of us have gone through, particularly in social science this year, and just Western as a whole has gone through a lot this year to deal with mental illness. And I felt that today was a really good time to talk about it. So I'm joined in the studio today by Maddie. Or Matt, I'll call him one of them. I don't know. We'll work through it. Athena and Iman joined me again, and I'm going to say this was Iman's initiative, and that's one of the great things I love about the forum is that I've managed to bring together a really awesome team of people, and they're no longer afraid to bring ideas to the forefront and to sort of present them. And this one's really Iman's idea. So I'm gonna turn to Iman, who's like, oh, please don't bug me yet. But we're going to talk about sort of how we're going to go to the cultural aspect of this first, and sort of how you see mental illness around you. You have a bit of a connection with it, and not through maybe personal experience. I don't know. We're not going to go there, but professional experience to start anyway.
So I volunteer at a psych clinic in London, and in my volunteering I get to see a lot of assessments that occur of like children who are at risk or have been referred by their doctors to maybe have like autism or some other developmental delay. And when I'm sitting in these assessments, one thing that's interesting is that when I see Caucasian families come in, they seem to be a lot more receptive to the idea that their child might have autism or have some other learning disability, whereas when you see the more like Asian families or just ethnic families in general, those families are a lot more against this, and I think that like that mirrors the attitude of my own family towards all of this stuff too, and just in casual conversations about mental illness that occur in the household, these kind of all reflect an idea of like this doesn't really exist, but they don't really know how to tackle it.
Okay. I guess I should do that. Yeah. How did your family? So, what are you planning to do with the rest of your life, Iman?
Good question. Well, I do want to go into some sort of counseling, so I ideally would like to be a psychologist. And when I told my parents that I wanted to be a psychologist, they were not at all impressed. Even when I said I wanted to be a psychiatrist, they were like, "No, that's not even a real doctor. That's a doctor for crazy people." And they totally, even though the process is the same, like go to med school, do a residency, they totally flipped their view because they didn't think that this was a real area of study. And my mom often refers to it as pseudoscience to look into. So yeah.
Do either of you guys, so Maddie or Athena, have sort of that sort of side of it? How does your family react, or how does your relatives react to sort of mental illness?
I would say that through my personal experience, like within my own family of mental illness, that they're very accepting towards it. And I'm a Caucasian background, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But and also just myself personally, something that made me realize how real it can be is, for example, my twin sister, who has gone through the exact same experiences as me throughout my life. It's kind of, and she's had a lot of trouble with her own depression, whereas I'm perfectly happy. And it's just really hard to understand what could make someone feel so different, even though you've gone through everything the exact same way. Okay. So that was one thing that really hit home to me. It's like, it's definitely got to be something chemically going on inside your brain or your body that isn't quite right, the way you want to be feeling. Yeah. Has your sister talked to your family about it, like just outside of you? Like, has she talked to your parents and stuff like that? Yeah, she has, and they've been completely supportive. My mom's her rock, and she helped her through this whole process, and now she's like back on track, doing amazing, and in an exchange in Australia right now, which I'm very jealous of. But she's had a full 360. Like, it just shows, like, when you're open about it and you seek help, that there can be extreme benefits and you can get better. Okay.
Athena, do you have any sort of has it touched your family in any way that you know? And if it has, how's your family reacted?
So I think coming from a Chinese background, I think my experiences have been similar to Amon's, just because they're both Asian families. Maybe just because. I think to a lesser extent, I think my parents are currently, they've gotten to a point where they're very accepting about mental illness, and they understand the importance of mental health. But I think when I was younger, I wanted to go into psychology as well. I went to neuroscience, and they were like, oh, it's good that you found something that you enjoy, but they weren't really, like, they didn't really understand like why I was drawn to it, I guess, but they were still very supportive. And I think my parents, so I remember when I was younger, they volunteered with the children's program at my church, and there was a child with autism there, and so they were very understanding of, I guess, like, his needs and how to cater to them. But I think they're a little bit more, I guess, iffy on the idea of anxiety and depression, I guess, if that makes sense. I think autism is to them a little bit more of like a concrete, like, oh, like, these are the concrete, like, symptoms and potential reasons. And with anxiety, it's more like, oh, well, isn't that just stress, like, just to a greater extent? Again, I think they've gotten much better in the past couple of years, after, like, I share with them, like, what I've been learning as well, and they've become very accepting and understanding of these issues. But I do think that there is a certain I guess, extent where the culture does kind of, like, shroud maybe the ability to really clearly identify something as a potential issue.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of issues to sort of bring up in what we've just talked about, but we'll go to the easiest one. There's nothing easy about this subject at all. But so Western is incredibly multicultural, and we're very lucky, but we also have a lot of sort of foreign students, international students. And my question sort of comes, there's been a great awareness of mental health in Western this year. I don't know about previous years. This is my first year here. How do you think it's reaching those audiences, and how do you think they're reacting and dealing with it? And I'm putting it particularly in this group is because I have two softs with me, and I know that this is a concern for both of you, so I'll throw that out to the field.
One thing that I was discussing with my roommate earlier in the year, I was kind of talking about my sister with him as well, and just on the topic of international students, he's almost said to me, without naming any names, but he basically referred to mental health as like a first world disease, where he took it back to his dad, who was growing up in Vietnam and having to deal with so much more, like, maybe you could say, troubles than we do in this modern society right now. And he was saying how, like, there was no even consideration for mental health because they have their own problems, like, that are so real and so physical that everyone can see right in front of them. So I think that maybe it's, like, I can't speak for other nations, but maybe it's not as prevalent in underdeveloped nations or places across the world. But yeah, it's definitely been a big thing at Western this year.
I think that, I guess with my own softing experience in being on leadership, seeing within our own team, in talking to people after events of this year, I was approached by one SOF in particular who said that they were struggling, but they didn't know how to seek help because they're from London and their parents don't believe in mental illness, and they cited that as being a huge barrier in them getting help because they didn't want their parents to find out. And so for them, although these resources are available and they're quite readily available, they just didn't feel like it was accessible to them in the form that they're present on campus.
Before I let Athena jump into this, I'm going to bring around to something that Maddie said, and it's very interesting that this is, the idea of this is a first world disease. Mm-hmm. And I almost sort of like saying it like that because at that point it crosses boundaries. It's not just pertaining to one group or one group suffers from it from another, but I sort of wonder, just from some of my experiences with friends and families who are immigrants and stuff like that, that maybe it's just as prevalent in those areas. It's just not diagnosed.
Definitely.
you know, and how much of that is sort of brought over with them. I mean, a lot of particularly Chinese students come here and are in BMOS, and I know BMOS is not easy. I have some friends in it that are having some issues at the moment.
Yeah, like
it's midterms.
Yeah.
It's midterm
I feel
season.
their pain.
So I sort of wonder if you know, them bringing that over here and seeing how open we are about it over here. At least some parts of us are, and you know, we have the Bell Talk and that sort of thing, which has been, you know, absolutely amazing for bringing these issues to the forefront.
Most definitely.
But, you know, how much of this is, does it start to open up? Or, you know, in places where it's not acknowledged, does it account for, you know, the high suicide rates, high other issues that sort of come about it, low productiveness and other things? So,
yeah. Does
anybody want to maybe touch on that a little bit, or should I just keep rambling?
Sure. I would definitely agree with what you said there. And what I was thinking is, it's got to be frustrating for people who might be in those societies who are feeling a certain way, like if they're depressed or have anxiety or any other sort of mental health form, and it's not diagnosed, so they don't know what's going wrong with them. So it definitely could account for more sadness, higher suicide rates. But I think that the way Western's going and the way Canada is as a nation going, I think it's a lot better that people are starting to look more into it, find out more of what's causing people to feel the way that they're feeling. And it might be even like our high tempo society that's making people feel more stress in recent days, anything like more pressures to succeed. But yeah, I think what you said there about how it's not diagnosed in other nations could be a big factor as well. Yeah.
So let's go over to Amon for a second. Sorry, Athena, I'm not trying to ignore you. So whenever you want, just jump right in. But for somebody who's actually going to go into who's thinking about going into a profession about diagnosing this, do you have any sort of ways to deal with it for outside of the predominantly white population who seems to be at least okay with opening up about these feelings?
Well, actually, I knew that I wanted to do this when I went on a trip in second year. I went to Belize as part of the alternative spring break program, and I went on a medical trip. So we were like running clinics in one of the small towns, and this woman came in, and she had like just had her baby recently, and she was describing all of these symptoms to the doctor that she was experiencing, and the doctor kind of like pulled us as like volunteers aside for a moment, and he was like, I think that she has postpartum depression, but I don't think that they know what that is here. And so he studied in Belize and stuff, but he brought the professional knowledge to like a group of people who may not know, and who may have been misdiagnosed as being like physically sick when maybe that was the problem all along. So he gave her some recommendations of like behavioral things that she could do, and he also like told her foods to eat that have properties of like anxiety reducing and stuff like that, within the confines of that environment that they live in. But for me, I think that it's like I have no idea how I personally would go about affecting people in other populations, but I do think that it's important to not turn a blind eye to it, and just kind of like, even though they're from somewhere else, it's still important to kind of treat everyone the same and like examine the symptoms as opposed to just assuming things.
I think that's dead on. Unfortunately, we can't change outside of our culture right now. Certainly, if we go over there and we start, but that's a whole anthropological issue. I'm not even going to get into that. But we can work within our own culture, and certainly, people who come to visit us, one of the things I sort of, I see how stressed that I am. I see how stressed other people are, and I wonder about the people who have come here from somewhere else, whose culture doesn't really accept this, and I know how hard it is to reach out for help here, and I just sort of, I guess part of this whole conversation that I want to bring up is that it, like other cultures where this isn't even accepted, we need to, let them know that it's okay to sort of reach out for help. And this will sort of segue into the next subject, but we'll tackle the hard question right off the bat. And I know Maddie's answer, and I'm pretty sure I know Iman's answer. I know my own answer, and I'm pretty sure I know Athena's answer, but we'll go with it anyway. Do you believe that depression, anxiety, the ones that are sort of in that group. Am I missing anything like that? Those are the two big ones. OCD sort of.
Bipolar disorder?
Bipolar disorder, definitely. Do you believe they exist? Are they real? Do people actually suffer from this, or is it quite literally all in their head?
Well, I mean, coming from a psychology background, and I'm sure Athena can agree with her like neuroscience knowledge. I mean, studies have been done for a long time to see whether there is a genetic basis or like a neural basis to these disorders, and study after study has shown that there are scientific backings for like this is not just something that people are making up, but rather a lot of people have a genetic predisposition to it, and your environment plays a role in it. So in my opinion, but also in like science's opinion, I think that it is real.
I absolutely agree. With my neuroscience background, I definitely can attest to the literature that shows that this is a real thing. It's not something that people make up, for attention or whatever else people think they might be doing it for. And even though unfortunately, a lot of disorders have been hard to find an exact biological factor or cause for, I mean, it's not as easy to pinpoint as like some physical diseases. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Sorry, I'll quickly interrupt because it does bring up a little issue. You see a lot of the stuff, at least I do, on my Facebook feed, and it's like if mental illness was as obvious as, say, a broken leg, it would be so much easier to treat. Mm-hmm. You don't go to somebody with a broken leg and say, well, have you tried just not having a broken leg?
Exactly.
If you go out for a walk, maybe it'll be better.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's a good analogy.
That was just my little interrupt because you were almost there for it. So I'm going to turn it back over to you guys again. So.
Do you want to finish that?
Oh yeah, sure. So even though there hasn't been like an exact thing that we can pinpoint out saying, oh, we fixed this, then the problems go away. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. But you can tell that beyond just like the evidence that there are definitely like neurochemical factors that are involved, just like functionally, speaking from an occupational therapist standpoint, we care a lot about function. But yeah, you can see how, stuff like OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, etc., they all can have such a distressing effect on someone's life. And that's part of the DSM criteria, is if it has, a significant impact on someone's functioning or causes them great distress, then that classifies it as the disorder.
And just because I try and keep this on a layman level, and I'm about as close to a layman as you can get, what is the DSM?
Sorry, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, I believe. So it's what psychiatrists or psychologists will use to diagnose a given patient as having a disorder. So it's basically kind of like, it's a classification system is what I'm trying to get at. Basically a catalog of the various mental health disorders, and it has specific criterion. It's not perfect, but it has specific criteria that need to be met, I guess, in order for something to be classified as as that person having that disorder.
And I'd also like to completely agree with both Iman and Athena on what they said, because not only is it something that we can't see, but it's something that we see often too many times in people that seem like they're completely happy. So like some of the most amazing people in my life that I've ever met are the people most affected behind closed doors by it. So it's got to be something. They're not the type of people where they're looking for some sort of attention. They're calling out for no reason. It's amazing people who are trying to make others' lives better, but inside there's something not chemically right that's really affecting them on levels that they can't handle.
Yeah, it's. I can't put anything better than that. That's the best I'll ever. I can't come close to being that output. So, and I think that's part of the devil's. Me just playing devil's advocate here. Is that I think a lot of people really, if they can't see it, they can't understand it, and that leaves them to sort of question whether or not it's real. And if you've never suffered from it, if you've never seen anybody suffer from it, and and sometimes you don't even know they're suffering. Some days it's they just don't want to get out of bed. Some days they just don't want to be around other people. And other days it's easier to sort of put on a face and pretend to be normal, I think would be about the easiest way to put it. You were talking about postpartum earlier, and I have a little boy, and right after he was born, I was watching my wife very, very closely for signs of postpartum, because it's very, very serious. And there's even something that even goes a step further, which would be postpartum psychosis, which is even worse. Fortunately, we didn't have to. I think. Well, I can't generalize because I don't know, but I think a lot of women go through it. Like, there is some form of depression that associates just because your hormones are all over the place, and it can actually come in two waves. And I think for a lot of things, particularly postpartum and bipolar, when things are good, you think, okay, well, the trouble's over. But particularly with postpartum, this is one of the ones that I am knowledgeable about and am okay to speak about. The second wave comes after about 2 years. You think like after about the first 6 months, you're in the clear, we're okay. And then that second wave hits and you really got to start to worry. And I think, for a lot of outsiders looking into the issue, those days where you're okay, where you can get up and get dressed and go to class and smile and laugh, they think, well, whew, that's over, whereas, and I guess, so we'll sort of segue into the other side of it, because there's sort of two parts to mental health disorders. There's the, and I could be completely wrong, and please correct me if I am, but you start getting into the ones with an actual easily identifiable physical condition to them, schizophrenia, there's a whole autism, things like that. And then we get into sort of the harder ones to differentiate would be the, OCD, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, things of that nature. And both of them have their sort of problems in treatment. And where do you think that, we need to be looking for those things, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
I think that a big problem that we currently face in terms of diagnosing and treating these illnesses is that there's still a pretty prominent stigma surrounding them. So people don't feel like they are knowledgeable enough about the symptoms that are occurring with like a particular disorder. So obviously with like OCD, for example, you have the like media portrayal of OCD in terms of someone who washes their hands like 100 times a day, or someone who has to check like if their tap is off or if their candle's burnt out or something. But there are so many different forms to all of these illnesses that people may not know that they're exhibiting the symptoms, and nobody on the outside may know also, because they may just think this is something like weird that they do that they don't want to show someone else, or that's just one example. But I think that in understanding the symptoms better, you're better able to target them and treat individual symptoms, because there's no like cure-all like depression pill or bipolar pill, because all the drugs that are currently available and treatments that are currently available are to do with individual symptoms. But people need to be open about those symptoms first, and it's no fault of their own, but just as a society, like being more open.
Does anybody want to add on to that one?
I think Iman covered it.
Yeah, Iman covered it really, really well. There have been some interesting medical breakthrough recently, particularly they found the genetic component to schizophrenia recently, which was kind of awesome. And they've also developed drugs very, very recently that break the blood-brain barrier, which will certainly go a long way into treatment. But as you said, there's also a stigma on taking medication and stuff like that. And it's very hard to get past that, oh my God, I'm going to be on a pill for at least the next year, Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, my timer is about to go off, and we do it again, which I'm actually glad that we get into these nice conversations right as we're about to go. So I think this will be a good time. I'm going to pause here. We're gonna do our announcements and stuff like that, and we'll be back in about a minute. All right, we'll be back in a second.
My name's Josephine. I'm going to second year medical science, and you're listening to 94.9 CHRW.